April 7, 2026, American President Donald Trump had given Iran a deadline, and now only a few hours were left for this deadline to expire. At 5:36 p.m., Trump wrote on his social media platform that if Iran does not open the Strait of Hormuz by the deadline, then tonight the entire Iranian civilization will end, never to return. The most powerful man in the world was threatening to destroy an entire country, an entire civilization. Everyone was stunned to read this. Leaders all over the world were trying to understand what Trump was going to do against Iran. Was this a reference to a nuclear bomb? Many people genuinely believed that night that the U.S. would drop a nuclear bomb on Iran. A ceasefire seemed unlikely. But then, just 90 minutes before Trump's deadline, a 2-week ceasefire was suddenly declared between Iran and the U.S. However, subsequent peace talks between the U.S. and Iran failed, and Trump initiated a naval blockade of Iranian ports. But on April 17th, another twist occurred. Suddenly, Iran declared that the Strait of Hormuz was open to all commercial vessels. The very next day, Iran made a U-turn and declared that the Strait of Hormuz was now closed. Cargo ships passing through it were also fired upon. Let's try to understand what is going on in this strange war. Hello, friends. The world is changing rapidly. Today, threats of nuclear war. Tomorrow, ceasefire. And the day after tomorrow, blocked. Those who don't stay up to date with this changing world will be left behind. And today, the biggest tool that can keep you ahead is AI. With AI, people are doing hours of research in minutes. They're building entire websites without writing a single line of code. Professional presentations, content, data analytics, everything is happening with AI. But the problem is that most people still think of AI as limited to chat and GPT. That's why I created the AI Masterclass. A 3-hour live workshop will be held on April 26th, this Sunday. In it, I'll teach you hands-on with over 30 AI tools that will enable you to do everything I just described. Over 100,000 people have taken this workshop, and if you were among those who took it last year, now's the time to update. AI Masterclass 3.0 will be held on April 26th, but the cost remains the same. Just the price of 2 movie tickets, so you can quickly join. The link can be found in the description below, or you can also scan this QR code. Iran War 28. More than 4,000 people have been killed in this war, which has lasted more than 50 days since February. More than 2,000 in Iran, more than 2,100 in Lebanon. 26 Israeli soldiers and 13 American soldiers have also been killed. These numbers seem like mere data points when I speak and to you when you hear them. But think about it, friends. More than 7,000 families have been destroyed forever. Millions have been forced to leave their homes. And the question is, for whom? What did all this achieve? The most dangerous escalation of this war occurred when the U.S. and Israel targeted Iran's nuclear facilities. On March 21st, Iran's Natanz nuclear facility was attacked. But the most dangerous was the attack on the Bushehr nuclear power plant. This is Iran's only functioning nuclear plant, which houses tons of nuclear material, and 4 bombs have been dropped around it since the war began. Most people probably don't even realize how dangerous this was. If this nuclear power plant had been damaged, even the slightest damage would have caused radioactive material to leak, contaminating the water. This would have been a massive disaster for the entire Gulf region, leading to diseases similar to those seen at the time of Chernobyl. Generations would not have been able to recover. Qatar's prime minister even warned in 2025 that if this nuclear power plant were damaged, nothing would be left in the Gulf countries. No water, no fish, no life. Basically undetermined. No water, no fish, nothing. The actual turning point in this entire nuclear drama occurred on April 3rd, and it proved every one of Trump's claims false. Trump had consistently claimed that the U.S. had total air dominance over Iran's skies. "We are militarily defeated," he said. "Iran has been defeated and the war is almost over." But on April 3rd, Iran shot down a U.S. F-15E Strike Eagle fighter jet. 2 people were aboard, a pilot and a weapons systems officer. Both crashed into Iranian soil. Although the pilot was rescued within hours, the other man aboard the plane was unaccounted for. At this point, a race began between Iran and the U.S. Who would reach this survivor first? Had Iran arrived first, an American colonel would have fallen into Iranian hands, which would have been such a huge embarrassment for Trump that it could have changed the course of the entire war. This downed airman remained hidden alone behind enemy lines for over 24 hours. Despite ejection injuries, he climbed to a height of 7,000 feet, escaped, and hid in a mountain crevice. In emergency situations, the protocol is to hide on the highest point of land in your vicinity. Here, he sent a radio message of just 3 words, "God is good." American officials initially believed the message was a hoax sent by Iran to ambush American forces for rescue. However, after analysis, they discovered it was a genuine message. This is where a rescue operation began that was historic in itself. The CIA initially launched a deception campaign. Misinformation was spread within Iran that both crew members had already been rescued so that Iranian forces would stop searching for the airmen. Following this, the CIA identified the airmen's exact location and shared it with the military. Hundreds of personnel from Delta Force and Navy SEAL Team 6 entered Iran. U.S. planes launched strikes in the area to prevent Iranian forces from arriving first, and the airman was eventually rescued. On April 5th, Trump posted, "We got him," stating that this rescue, without any losses behind enemy lines, demonstrates America's total air dominance over Iranian skies. However, the truth was that despite the successful rescue operation, Iran shot down a U.S. fighter jet and also fired on the rescue helicopters, causing 1 Warhawk to crash and 2 Black Hawk helicopters to be hit. Additionally, 2 transport aircraft were damaged, and the military destroyed them on Iranian soil to prevent them from falling into Iranian hands. Meanwhile, Trump had given Iran 4 deadlines to open the Strait of Hormuz. First March 21st, then March 23rd, then March 28th, and then April 6th. Iran ignored all 4. By April 7th, when nothing worked, Trump launched into a barrage of abuse. I'm not kidding. Look at this post. It looks like it was written by a 16-year-old. "Open the strait, you crazy bastards, and you'll be living in hell. Shryadi and Nexer." Trump declared that after the deadline, power plants, bridges, and everything else would be targeted. Every power plant in Iran will be burned, explored, and never to be destroyed again. But Iran still didn't open the Strait of Hormuz. This was the same day, friends, the night Trump posted the post that shook the entire world. "Today, a whole civilization will end, one that will never come back. I don't want this to happen, but perhaps this is how it will happen." Trump even said that it wouldn't be a war crime because Iranians are animals and we have to stop them and let them have nuclear weapons. He dehumanized the people of an entire country, calling them animals. Amnesty International said this amounted to a threat of genocide. Legal experts said that deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure is a war crime under international law. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that attacking civilian infrastructure is a crime under international law. Trump's deadline was just hours away. Embassies in several countries in the Middle East issued warnings to their citizens to seek safe harbor. The entire world was on the brink of a war like never before. Before the deadline, the U.S. struck Karg Island, from where 90% of Iran's oil exports come. But then something unexpected happened. Just 90 minutes before the deadline, Iran and the U.S. announced a 2-week ceasefire agreement. And the most surprising thing was that this ceasefire was initiated by Pakistan. According to an Al Jazeera report, after Operation Sindoor, a direct channel was opened between Pakistan Army Chief Asim Munir and Donald Trump, through which Pakistan secured the ceasefire. And this ceasefire agreement stipulated that Iran would open the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for a 2-week U.S. ceasefire agreement, and talks would be held in Pakistan on April 10th for a permanent ceasefire. But embarrassingly for both Pakistan and the U.S., on April 8th, within hours of the ceasefire announcement, Israel launched more than 100 strikes in Lebanon, killing over 300 people. This was Israel's deadliest bombing of Lebanon to date. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that Lebanon is not included in the ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran. So I can bomb here. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance also said that the U.S. never promised to include Lebanon in the ceasefire. However, the statement issued by Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif regarding the ceasefire clearly stated that Lebanon and all other countries would be included in this ceasefire. Consequently, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi, quoting Sharif, said that the U.S. must decide either declare a ceasefire or continue the war through Israel. Both things cannot happen simultaneously. This confusion over the ceasefire continues. On April 11th, the U.S.-Iran peace talks begin in Islamabad. The two sides discussed for 21 hours, during which Iran presented a 10-point peace proposal. Iran's demand included the removal of all sanctions imposed on it. Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz should be recognized. U.S. forces should withdraw from the Middle East. And most importantly, Iran's right to uranium enrichment should be accepted. According to Trump, most points had been agreed upon, but the most important one regarding nuclear power had not been agreed upon. On the morning of April 12th, J.D. Vance, heading the U.S. delegation, announced that an agreement had failed. According to the New York Times, the U.S. wanted Iran to suspend all nuclear activity for 20 years, but Iran was only willing to suspend nuclear activity for 5 years. Immediately after the peace talks failed, Trump announced that the U.S. Navy would initiate a complete blockade of Iranian ports. Now, there were 2 blockades on the Strait of Hormuz. Even after closing Hormuz, Iran was allowing oil from friendly countries like China to pass through. But now, through this American blockade, the U.S. wanted to prevent Chinese ships from passing through. China also warned the U.S. against interfering in its relations with Iran. After the blockade of Iranian ports began, the U.S. stopped or redirected approximately 13 ships. However, on April 17th, Iran suddenly announced that the Strait of Hormuz was now completely open, at least as long as the ceasefire is in place. Following this, oil prices immediately dropped by 10%. However, the very next day, Iran took a U-turn and stated that the Strait of Hormuz was closed. Trump stated that the blockade imposed by the U.S. would not be lifted until a deal was reached. Friends, India has also suffered a significant loss in this entire war when Pakistan was conducting the world's largest peace negotiations, a task ideally ought to be undertaken by countries like India. Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar then called Pakistan a broker for this mediation. Jaishankar said that India is not engaging in mediation because it is not a broker country like Pakistan. But forget about mediation. Even our country's interests are not being secured by this government. On April 18th, 2 Indian-flagged merchant vessels, one of which was a supertanker, were attempting to cross the Strait of Hormuz. This supertanker was carrying 2 million barrels of Iraqi oil, and suddenly IRGC gunboats opened fire on them. Audio of this has also surfaced, which you can listen to. SEPA Navy. This is Motor Sun headed. You got me clearance to go. You're firing now. Let me turn back. Both vessels had to make a U-turn and return. On Saturday, a total of 8 Indian-flagged vessels approached the Strait of Hormuz, but were forced to return due to increased tensions, after which India summoned the Iranian ambassador and expressed concern. But the question remains, how did India find itself in such a situation? Until a few months ago, Iran was a friend of India, and the two were jointly building the Chabar port. But today, Iran is firing on Indian ships. Furthermore, the Indian government has to repeatedly seek permission from the United States to determine whether India can buy oil from Russia. It has to repeatedly request waivers from the United States. After much pressure, the United States has granted India permission to purchase Russian oil, but only until May 16th. The question is, why is it repeatedly asking for permission from the United States? Perhaps Jaishankar can make a reel with a red laser, calling Pakistan a broker. But the question is, can he ensure India's oil security? We should be able to buy oil from whichever country we choose without having to beg the United States every time. Amidst all this, the good news is that a 10-day ceasefire has been declared between Israel and Lebanon. The U.S. mediated this, and Trump posted that Netanyahu had agreed to a ceasefire in a phone call. Negotiations for permanent peace would take place after 10 days. However, Israel has stated that its troops will remain in southern Lebanon. The latest update is that the 2-week ceasefire between Iran and the U.S., which began on April 22nd, is ending. The question is whether a deal can be reached between these two countries before then. If a deal is not reached, there is a risk of war resuming. But another major question is, even if a deal is reached, will Israel agree to it? Amidst this ongoing war, Israel has taken another action that has shaken the entire world. On March 30th, 2026, Israel passed a death penalty law. This law is perhaps one of the most discriminatory laws in the world. Under this law, anyone found guilty of terrorism-related offenses will be hanged. Surprisingly, this law applies only to Palestinians in the West Bank. If an Israeli kills a Palestinian, this law will not apply. Since the Gaza war began in 2023, there have been several ceasefires. But whenever the fighting seems to be coming to an end, Israel does something that restarts the war, and the US always comes to Israel's side. So, the only question is, how long will this devastation last? I hope you found the video inspiring. Don't forget to join the AI Masterclass, which is taking place this Sunday, April 26th. You can join by clicking here. Thank you very much.